You're watching YouTube, the cable access of the 21st century. It's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m. where I am, and it's time to talk about movies and answer your questions. Welcome to Dan's World. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Dan's World. I've hopefully made some improvements with the audio. Hopefully you can hear me a little better. I'm a little closer to the intro. Tried to make the video look a little brighter. I will be looking at your comments throughout the show. If you want to leave a super chat, I will definitely answer those questions during the show. But this is also a really interesting episode. This is what we would call back in my Screen Junkies days a broccoli episode. But the broccoli tastes nice. You know that I like to do broccoli, but the broccoli tastes good on the show. We have a big package of Disney stuff to talk about today because they had their earnings call for the latest quarter, which doesn't sound that appealing, but there was a lot of stuff that's come out today, including the future plans for Hulu, some big deals with the WWE and NFL, and I think just some kind of interesting insights into their business overall. So we're going to talk about that. Also, the leadership team at new Paramount, which is now taking shape. So we're going to see who's actually going to be in control of that new company. We knew that David Ellison was going to be there, and we knew that Jeff Shell was going to be there. But we're also going to look at who will actually be heading up Paramount Pictures, as well as their TV division. And of course, as I mentioned, we're going to be answering your questions. Hopefully, I'll have worked out my system a little bit better this week as far as being able to see your comments and put them on screen. If not, I've got my backup system over here so that I can look at that a little bit more. But before we get to that, I want to jump into what we saw today with Disney. It was their quarterly earnings call, which sounds very dry on its surface, but there were some interesting pieces of information. The first one being, and it's what I titled the show around, their future plans for Hulu. Hulu, as you know, is now fully owned by Disney, and they have basically total control. They bought out the last controlling interest, and they announced today that the Hulu app, which is what a lot of people watch Hulu through, will be winding down. Hulu itself is not going to go away. It can still be its own standalone service, but the Hulu app itself in 2026 will be fully integrated into Disney Plus. So it's just going to be one app for Disney Plus and Hulu. However, interestingly, if you are in an international market, you might be seeing Hulu on its own for the first time because Disney will now replace Star with Hulu internationally. Hulu is now going to have an international presence for the first time. But as far as watching things on your own Hulu app, those days are soon to be in the rearview mirror. I am a Hulu user myself. From what I was reading, I have my personal live TV subscription is through Hulu. From what I've read, the live element of the Hulu subscription will be transferred into the Fubo service, which I don't have. That's going to be interesting because I actually jumped ship from YouTube TV earlier this year to Hulu Plus live streaming because the price was a little bit better. I could get the bundle. But now that that's all changing, I don't know what's going to change. I know there are a lot of people that have Hulu through Spotify, and I didn't see any guidance. Maybe some has come out, but I didn't see any guidance that was able to specify what's going to happen with those customers. But this is just part of this whole streaming war thing that's been going on, which is that there is no normal. The ground is always shifting beneath your feet. There's no stable ground. There's mergers. There's things that are moving from one service to another service. And now it's coming with Hulu. Between the two apps, I have a Disney Plus app and a Hulu app. I can watch Hulu through my Disney Plus app. I prefer the Hulu app. So I'm curious to see if it's just going to be the existing Disney Plus interface with Hulu folded in, or if they're going to come up with something new. I mean, they've got some time to think about it, but the days of Hulu being its own standalone streaming service are pretty much by the wayside. But that wasn't the only thing that we learned in today's earnings call. This is kind of a summary, and there are a few interesting pieces of information. We'll go over a lot of these individually. So this was the Disney Q3 earnings call. First of all, operating income from linear networks domestically dropped 14% versus the same quarter a year ago. This has been an ongoing story. We've talked about this, the fact that linear television is not as profitable as it once was. But income from streaming was up. The company made a $346 million profit in quarter three, of 2025 versus quarter three of 2024, where it lost $19 million. So that's the shifting media landscape. The linear networks are going down, but the streaming side of things is getting more and more profitable, not just because of more subscribers, but because they're increasing the costs on that. The division that includes theatrical revenue posted a $21 million loss for the quarter, despite the fact that Lilo and Stitch, which made $1 billion worldwide, was in that quarter, and that's due to the underperformance theatrically of Elio and Thunderbolts, and also what's called a write-down on the value of those movies, which is basically when a movie comes out, the company, Disney in this case, will value that movie at a certain amount, and they'll say, well, based on our projections, we estimate that this movie is going to be worth X amount based on how popular we think that it is. And so when a movie comes out and doesn't do as well as the studio had projected, that means the company then has to go back down and write down the value of that film and say, well, we had valued it at this much, but now we think it's this much. And so your earnings are potentially less on that film. It's a less valuable asset. And so what they have really is offsetting, basically. The $1 billion success of Lilo and Stitch was offset by the underperformance of Elio and Thunderbolts. And so that's the question about what does it take to take $1 billion hit off the board? Well, it takes two very costly, underwhelming films to basically take you back down to zero. Last year in the same quarter, that division reported a $254 million profit because of Inside Out 2 and how well that movie did. The operating income from the Parks division was up over 10% to $2.5 billion, so that continues to be big for Disney. This was an interesting one. Okay, so because Hulu was sort of reclassified tax-wise because Disney took full control over it, there was an income tax adjustment, and they basically got a $2.7 billion tax break because of that, meaning they not only didn't have to pay taxes, they got a $2.7 billion tax break, which means that their tax rate for the third quarter was negative 85.1%. When you compare that to quarter three of last year, the company paid $251 million in taxes, which was an effective tax rate of 8.1%. And this is just the reality of corporate tax. Is because of the Hulu reclassification, Disney had a negative tax rate. But even when you go back and look last year, the fact that they had a tax rate, they were paying taxes at an effective tax rate of 8.1%, that is a heck of a lot better than my tax rate. And, again, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on this. And I know that people say, well, corporate tax rate, corporations inject money, they provide jobs. There's a reason that they're not taxed at the same amount as individuals. I get it. If you quadrupled Disney's tax rate, I still don't think they would be paying the same tax rate that I am. But that is how advantageous the tax structure can often be to corporations, is that they pay a much, much, much lower tax rate than your average person is paying on their income. And again, this isn't necessarily just a flat corporations bad, people good type thing, but it is shocking when you see in black and white just the difference in taxes that are paid between different income rates and different brackets, the higher rates, and what corporations pay. And again, there are plenty of arguments that people make saying like, well, the higher income ratios are the ones that provide jobs, et cetera. Again, I think that there's a lot of pushback to that. But so Disney paying a negative 85% tax rate for the third quarter, which would be very nice. And then finally, the last little bit was, it's not on this graphic, I don't believe, but Disney is also going to stop reporting subscriber numbers for their streaming services next year, saying that they would prefer to focus on revenue. Netflix has already done this, so Disney's not blazing the trail here. Looking at the numbers, they were all pretty much flat from the same quarter last year. So there wasn't a big loss in subscribers. There also wasn't a big gain in subscribers. And I think that that's what a lot of these companies like Disney and Netflix have figured out at this point, that the subscriber numbers that they were once using to wow investors when their streaming services were new, or hopefully wow investors, are not as impressive now because we are reaching kind of a streaming critical mass, and you're not going to see in the positive, if you were to divulge these numbers, the upside is pretty much gone because you're not going to have a quarter where you're like, we added 25 million subscribers. Netflix has come close before in their numbers, but even they don't report them anymore. It can really only be a negative for you as a company if you're looking at numbers, and they know that Wall Street and the investors will look at any number they give them. So what they're basically saying is, well, the numbers aren't important. The revenue is important, which to some degree is true. But Disney, the latest company to say that this is not going to be something that they report anymore. I'm glancing at the comments here back and forth. It says, check your camera settings, Dan. Color and exposure is off. Well, I changed the camera settings because I didn't think that they were great. Let me see if this actually improves anything. I have my, on this monitor here, I have my streaming setup here, but I noticed it's a white screen, which can kind of wash me out. So tell me if that's better. But I also wanted to say that's better. Okay, well, that's, I'm working with my second screen here, but the difference being if the interface is a white color, then it kind of blows me out. So I won't be able to address your questions directly on screen because they're now over here on my second monitor, but I'll work on fixing that. Like we say, here on the channel, I have been working on a lot of stuff to try to figure out how to be better at streaming and how to make it look and sound better for you guys. So hopefully I at least sound better, and we're working on the look. So that's what I'm talking about with Disney as far as their earnings. But Disney also disclosed that they have made some massive deals, and it's all tied in to the launch of their new ESPN streaming service. So they are launching a standalone ESPN streaming service. It's going to be $30 a month. And it's launching in really just, a matter of a couple weeks now. It's launching on August the 21st. It's going to be priced at $30 a month. It carries all of ESPN's networks and programming. So it's not just sporting events like you see with ESPN Plus. You'll also get all the networks and, pardon the interruption, and all of the stuff that they play, as well as I think the ESPN on ABC and a lot of their other things. So it is an enhanced amount of ESPN stuff. And they are bringing in the big guns because, first of all, it was announced that ESPN is acquiring basically the media assets of the NFL. They're going to own and operate the NFL network. They're going to have rights to the NFL Red Zone brands, and they can distribute that channel to pay TV customers. They're going to merge NFL fantasy football with ESPN fantasy football. The NFL is going to retain rights to NFL Films and NFL.com. They will continue to own, operate, and produce, and also distribute digitally the NFL Red Zone channel. And in return, the NFL is going to get a 10% stake in ESPN. And there will also be 7 games still that are presented annually on the NFL Network that are going to be shifted, I think, over. Some of them, 4 of them, I believe, from the ESPN schedule. So a massive partnership between ESPN and the NFL, or at least an expansion of a partnership. They already were partnered to air a number of games every single year, but a real strengthening of the relationship between ESPN and the NFL. And then this was a big one that just got announced today. The WWE and ESPN also reached a huge rights agreement. It was worth, I think, around $1.5 billion. ESPN platforms, including the new streaming service, will now be the exclusive home for the WWE's premium live events. We're talking WrestleMania, things like the Royal Rumble. That is going to start next year. Internationally, this is only for the US. Internationally, Netflix will continue to have distribution rights. The service that takes the biggest hit from this is Peacock. Peacock already lost a chunk of its WWE rights to Netflix. They're now losing an even bigger chunk of those rights. Those big premium live events are now going to ESPN next year. And I was reading something that said that the library to WWE's previous events, it's kind of unknown where that's going to end up after, I think, March of next year. It's currently on Peacock. Those rights could be snapped up by ESPN. Those rights could be snapped up by Netflix. But Peacock has been one of those streaming services that has never been one of the most stable, I guess you could say. It's been one of the also-rans, if you will, and now they're losing a big portion of their rights to the WWE and what they're allowed to show on their streaming service. So I would imagine if you're Peacock, this is not great news because this is just another blow to what you have to offer. And again, I'm seeing some of the comments. So again, these are rights just to the premium live events that are happening, the big live events that the WWE does every year. This does not affect things like Raw, which is currently on Netflix, and those rights. This is just those, 5, 6, 7 events a year that Peacock still had the rights to. So that's basically where we are. We've got more NFL moving to ESPN. We've got WWE premium events moving to ESPN. But if you're an NFL fan, now the rights are stretched out over this streaming network. I think there's still one or two games that are going to be on Peacock and now some on the ESPN streaming app. And then the NFL network is now a part of that. And then broadcast TV. It's harder and harder to find every single game. If you're a WWE fan, I guess you're just switching from one app to another, but even still, some of this programming is going to be on Netflix. Some of this programming is going to be on ESPN. Some of it is still on linear television. This to me is the difficulty of the streaming age, which is that everything now is spread across multiple paid streaming services. And so if you're a fan of something now, if you want to keep up with it, I mean, I'm glad I'm not an NFL fan that wants to sit and watch every game every year, because the number of services you would have to have, Amazon Prime, ESPN, Peacock, NFL Network, linear, I mean, it's insane. And it's this fracturing. And I don't think it's good for the marketplace overall, because I think that there is a point at which people are just going to get frustrated and they're going to give up, and they'll probably go to less legal means of finding these things, because it becomes such a hassle and an expense. Everybody is trying to be the king of the mountain still, and yet it's more fractured than it's ever been. And so I don't know where we go from here. I mean, I don't think that we have improved where we were before all this streaming started. I don't think that things are more convenient, and I don't think that things are less expensive either, because all of those cost benefits and the savings that you got from getting all these streaming services for cheap, that's all gone away pretty much. I would say that if you wanted to have access to the same amount of programming that you had on cable, now on streaming, it would be just as expensive, if not more expensive. But everybody wants to win, or at least everyone wants to be a contender. And you don't see many streaming services that probably should pursue mergers or maybe figure things out. They're just not willing to do that at this point. So yeah, big news for WWE, big news for ESPN, big news for Disney. And also one big thing, this is kind of going back to what we saw back in 2020. It was also announced today from Disney that Hamilton is going to be hitting theaters finally. If you'll remember, Hamilton was originally scheduled for a theatrical release in 2020. This is the Hamilton that is currently streaming on Disney Plus, the one that is the live recording of the show in theaters that was done about a little less than 10 years ago now. But it will be released on September 5th. Here in the U.S. and on some other dates around the world, with a special introduction from the cast, kind of bring them all together. But after many, many years, I guess about 5 years delayed from when it was originally supposed to hit theaters, Hamilton will now actually be hitting theaters later this year. And again, that is revenue that is going to go to Disney, and we'll see how that jibes with what they've got going on so far this year and what their theatrical goals are. But yeah, so a lot going on with Disney. And we're also going to talk about, of course, all the news with Paramount Plus, and well, not just Paramount Plus, but Paramount Global and their new leadership team. But I want to get to some of your questions, and I'm going to try to get to as many as I can here. First of all, this one comes from Christopher Brickner, who says, Matt Smith joining Star Wars Starfighter is bad news, as whenever he joins a big budget movie, it always turns out bad. I'm joking, FYI. Well, Matt Smith doesn't have the best track record. We've got Terminator. What was it, Genesis that he was in? Was it Terminator Genesis that I think it was Terminator Genesis. Yeah. Or maybe Dark Fate. It doesn't really matter, does it? Say what you will about Morbius, and I have, and I will continue to. He was not the problem with Morbius. I would say that it's not so much a matter of Matt Smith being not great in big films. It's that the big films have been bad around Matt Smith. So we'll see. I mean, I think he's got a good tone for Star Wars. Tyler Anderson just sending in a super chat. Thank you so much, Tyler. That is very generous. I appreciate you watching the show. I hope you're enjoying it. Let's see what else we've got coming in here. Cody Gill says, Dan, I'm rewatching Movie Fights, and you were a beast. Thank you. What were your best and worst memories from those days? I do miss those days. Well, you know what, Cody? I also miss those days. Um, Movie Fights was a really, really fun show. And, we did, I think the last one that I was there for live was on Oscar night of 2020, right before I left, right before everything shut down due to the pandemic. And I would love to see the show come back in some form, whether I was on it or not. It was just such a fun thing to do, and it's weird when people say like, what are your memories from movie fights, or best and worst memories. I would say, largely the people that watched movie fights have a better recall of it than I do, because when we were doing it, it was most days, especially once Screen Junkies Plus launched and we kind of got into the teeth of it. It was just kind of something that was scheduled in the afternoon. So I'd prep for the show, we'd go and do the show, we'd have a great time, and then that would be it for movie fights. But then it would be to, we would have to go finish our day and give notes on an honest trailer or finish writing something or whatever. And so, I never really had a whole lot of time to process each fight and think about, oh, that was great. I mean, best and worst memories. I think I even talked about it maybe on the first live show we did. That it was the high and the low for me. That movie fights that we did live at Comic-Con with Kevin Smith and Elijah Wood was so much fun. And that was almost kind of the peak for me of like understanding kind of like where we had gotten to. The fact that we had this big event at Comic-Con and we had a party there and so many people showed up, and it was incredible just to think about how far we had come from when I started, and it had started even before I got there. But my biggest regret is always that Kevin Smith movie fight where he brought up, what movie would you wipe out from existence? And his answer was Triumph of the Will. And I completely fumbled on my recovery to that answer. And I feel like I could have fought that better than I did. And that's the one fight really that I look back on and I'm like, I really blew that. I could have done that better. But as far as best memories were always, I loved doing the show. I loved hanging out with everybody that did the show. It was just a fun show to do. I liked debating, but I always loved when we would go do it on the road. So when we go to a convention and we do it at Comic-Con, or we did it at New York Comic-Con, we did it at a few others kind of scattered around the country. That was a lot of fun, because when you get that live energy and you're in a room with people that are there to see it, and you can kind of see how your arguments are playing, or if somebody has an argument that's really funny and you get that laugh, that live laugh, that was always good. So I'd say anytime we got to do it live was always my favorite. FreakStomp95 says, hey, Dan, what do you think about studios offering mid-budget movie ticket prices for a few dollars less to get people in, like Caught Stealing? I think that that's an interesting idea. I mean, the idea of like, hey, it's almost kind of like tier pricing. Like your higher budget movies, the tickets cost more. Your lower budget movies, they cost a little bit less. I think contractually with the different studios and the different talent involved, that would be pretty difficult. You'd have to go to the unions, I'm sure, probably, and work out language as far as what's the bottom tier for a high budget movie, and what does a mid budget tier movie cost, and et cetera. I mean, honestly, sometimes these mid budget movies do better with a lower ticket price than the blockbuster films do, because their costs are so high. I know that AMC is expanding their discount program, and when people can go see movies for cheaper. I think that is a good idea. But I think it's an interesting incentive maybe, or an idea for an incentive, but I also wouldn't want to create a tier system that sort of stigmatizes movies that aren't in, quote unquote, the upper tier. I would prefer that we come up with a way to make the industry overall healthier, and not be like, well, we're going to charge people less to see this $50 million movie. Let's see. Aditya Humnabadkar, apologies if I butchered that. With Fantastic Four underperforming, do you think Avengers Doomsday is going to be the least performing Avengers film? Love your work, by the way. Thank you so much. I think that we are a little too far out with Doomsday. What we've seen with Pixar, and we've seen it with the MCU as well, is that how one movie performs doesn't necessarily dictate how the next movie is going to do. Now, Avengers movies, I mean, we haven't had one since Avengers Endgame. The theatrical marketplace is entirely different from what we had back in 2019 and beyond that or before that. So even if it is the least grossing or the lowest grossing Avengers film, I think that it is as much to do with the marketplace now and the realities of international box office and domestic box office as it might be to the quality of the film, assuming that the movie was as acclaimed and got a reaction that was as good as some of the others of Avengers movies. So, I think it's a possibility, but it's not necessarily a one follows the other thing, because sometimes there'll be a movie that's sort of a down movie as far as box office, but if you get the right combination of things for the next one, the next Pixar movie, the next MCU movie, then people will show up like they always did. Black Bag says, "Hey Dan, if no more adoption requests for now, don't worry. Have you seen the trailer for Shelby Oaks? If so, what do you think?" I did see the trailer for Shelby Oaks because I went to see Together last week, and they ran the trailer for Shelby Oaks before Together. I'm in a kind of an interesting position with Shelby Oaks because not only do I support Chris Stuckman and what he's doing, because I've known him for a while. He came out and did several things with us at Screen Junkies, and we've exchanged some emails, back and forth over the years. And so I support him personally and the fact that he's making his own movie. But I also I was a supporter financially of that movie. Not a huge supporter, but I am part of the Kickstarter for that and contributed some money to it. So I'm kind of working out my way, like as a critic, of how I'm going to handle Shelby Oaks. I will say that I think it's so exciting that Mike Flanagan got involved. You get a company like Neon that's attached to distribute it. And I've read the news that they saw the movie and offered some additional funds to go back and shoot some more stuff and kind of do some enhancements of what Chris was able to do. So I'm mainly just excited for him, and I am anxious to see the movie. I'm curious to see just what it's very mysterious the way that they've sold it so far. But I'm just happy that it's finally getting out there, honestly, because it's been such a long road to get this thing out. And so many people have boarded it since then that, I just want to see it more than anything. TG says, "What streaming services do you have and what are your favorites?" Netflix and Disney Plus are some of mine, and Max being an honorable mention. I have a lot of streaming services, as you might imagine, because I cover a lot of stuff here. I'm very lucky in that I'm part of some organizations, some critics organizations, as well as the Television Academy. Those organizations offer a complimentary access to some of the services, not all of them, but to some of them. But as far as the ones that I have a paying subscription to, Disney Plus, which is pretty big, again, just for review purposes. I'm a Hulu subscriber and I have my live TV through them, so I do not have a subscription to traditional linear cable. I'm a Criterion Channel subscriber. That is not one of the major ones, I guess, but I just like to watch really good movies from time to time, and I like supporting what Criterion does. So I'm a Criterion Channel subscriber. I am a Max subscriber, which I was paying for until just a couple months ago, and then I was able to get through one of those organizations a subscription. And then Paramount Plus was one that I had discontinued, but again, that was offered as part of a thing for, I think that might have been the TV Academy offered a Paramount Plus subscription. So I do have Paramount Plus, although I had discontinued it. I'm trying to think if there are anything else or any other ones that I'm sure there's a Peacock. I think I've got the lowest tier of most streaming services I actually subscribe to, because there's usually something on one of them that's something I want to watch for the channel. But for me, that also means that is a business expense and it has tax implications and etc. So yeah, I'd say I have most of them. As far as my favorites, I love the Criterion Channel, and I actually am a fan of Max because I like a lot of their original programming. So Max, I would say, is one that I watch the most on my own time, and not just, hey, I'm going to review something. Miko Jokipi says, "Hey Dan, I run an independent cinema in Finland, and I really appreciate the insight on the international movie market you have. If you ever need a hand with analyzing the Nordic film markets, hit me up. You are going to be my first call." The first time I'm sitting there agonizing over the gross of a movie, and I'm like, I need to know the finished gross for this film. Now I've got that contact, so I appreciate it. Christopher Brickner, thank you, Christopher, says, how are you feeling about the Starfighter film? I have doubts with it taking place after episode 9, Levy directing it and Levy co-writing the film. I honestly don't have strong feelings on it either way. Again, it's so early. Um, Star Wars is in such a place right now. At least it seems like they're committing to something. So, yeah, I don't really have any strong feelings for or against. I'm just curious to see what they do with it. Mance3 says, I went back to watch movie fights for a few, and I noticed a huge negative shift in film criticism from then now. What's your take on this? Let's see, I went back to watch movie fights for a few, and I noticed a huge negative shift in film criticism. I'm guessing you mean from then to now. So basically that you noticed that there was a shift in negative film criticism before, basically, from the several years ago that movie fights was on. If that's the case, I don't think you're wrong. I think that, well, a lot of things have happened. First of all, on YouTube, it's just the fact that negative reviews will often generate more revenue, more attention, more clicks than a positive review or something that's of a different tone. I mean, for example, War of the Worlds, which is a movie that I hadn't really heard of on Amazon Prime, that I kind of watched this past weekend because I'd seen a little bit about it and saw some clips, and I was like, oh, that looks like a really interesting movie. I'm going to check that out. And then I saw it, and I did legitimately think that it was one of the worst movies that I'd ever seen. I mean, when I say that sort of thing here on the channel, this movie is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, that's not exaggeration. And you'll notice I don't do that very often. But also, I don't see movies like that very often. So I did a review, and it's on track to be one of my best performing videos ever. And it is, performing better than a review of the biggest blockbuster MCU or the biggest blockbuster DC movie. I mean, it's outperforming those. So I think that people generally have a natural inclination to want to see people talking about, especially if the movie is generally considered to be actually atrocious. And mine isn't driven by anger. That was very much a review or an analysis that was driven by humor. But people generally want to watch that. So when that generates results, then more people do that kind of thing. And when negative outclicks positive, then you are going to see more of the negative. So I think that's part of it. It's just genuine audience desire and interest. I think another part of it is that the movie review part of YouTube in the last 5-ish years has sort of been brought under the wing of other sorts of conversations, political conversations, and there is a proven very passionate and to many creators lucrative audience that will really watch stuff that is negative towards particular things, largely often negative toward Disney, negative toward Marvel, negative toward Star Wars. That is a very big profit center on YouTube. And that's just truth. With calling it a profit, it is. I mean, there are whole channels that are made based on that. Channels that are to a degree of 5 or 10 times more popular and more watched than this one. So I think that that's part of it too. I mean, I guess it's also just folded into the fact that it is a proven, potentially lucrative thing to sort of traffic a little bit more negatively. And then you combine that with, I think, some of the political things that have gotten mixed up, and that just kind of gets us to where we are. Ben Stanley says, why hasn't Disney put Elio on PVOD yet? That's a good question. I'm sure that they have their own calculus on that, and maybe it was just a pre-executed plan, but they obviously want to try to keep it in theaters as long as they can. I mean, that's part of it too, is even if Elio could be on PVOD, Disney may not be wanting to further train the audience to not go see a movie in theaters. Oh, it'll be on PVOD. If they just put Elio on PVOD and let's say 3 weeks after it came out, well, that further maybe adds to the thing that might have hurt Elio at the box office, which is, well, I don't need to go see it in theaters. I can watch it at home anyway pretty soon. So maybe that's why too. It's sort of a long form strategy. Brian Percival says, why do studios not report digital purchases slash rentals consistently? This can add context to how a movie is doing outside of the box office, especially, excuse me, since studios use VOD to justify shorter exclusive theatrical windows. That's a good question. I think that it's sort of like insider secrets. Like studios generally will disclose the smallest number of things that they can when it comes to their finances, because that means that they don't have to be accountable to agents and stars that are saying, well, why didn't I get, why did I only get this amount of money if this movie's making you that amount of money? They can kind of control the narrative around those numbers. And so I think the reason why they don't disclose those numbers unless they choose to is because it gives them the most amount of control over the narrative around them. And they can also have ultimate control over what they tell agents and what they tell stars and as they're negotiating contracts and stuff. I think that's a big part of it. So, I'm gonna depart. I have a lot more super chats, but I saw there's a comment here that was just above this one that I wanted to address, and I was actually thinking about addressing this on the show anyway. So I don't think I'm going out of my way. But this is something that people have been bringing up to my attention, and this is also not. This is just about the topic itself. This is not about specifically the person this is talking about. But I saw Man on Fire, JI says, John Campea said taking inflation into account is stupid. And I have actually gotten many people that come into the comments and have told me the same thing. And we talked about this on Charts, the fact that I've been getting more pushback than ever as far as taking inflation into account for the box office. And many people saying like, well, I watched John Campea and he says it's stupid. Also, apparently, he and I appreciate this, said that this week, and again, I haven't seen it, but people come and tell me. I feel like I'm sort of the gossip hub of, because people come to my channel and tell me what everybody else is saying. They said that John also said that I was one of the people that does do inflation accounted numbers and don't put a spin on it, and so he doesn't really mind it. What I do necessarily, because, and it's true, I'm not trying to spin anything using inflation adjusted numbers. I'm just presenting a kind of historical context for everything. But I get it really just kind of goes to adjusting for inflation in general. And I may adjust this on Charts, and I'm not going to go super deep into it, but I do it, and I've explained myself over and over again. And even in the comments this week, I tried to explain myself. I think that it's not supposed to be a comparison between movies as far as it would have done as well as it did back then. It's just literally in context historically, here's how the dollars stack up against each other. And I've been saying that for many years now. And, I've decided, I think, that I'm good. I'm going to use inflation adjusted numbers, and I'm going to continue to frame them the way that I always have. And if someone doesn't like it, okay, that's fine. You don't have to, but this idea of, me trying to, I have a thing that I do, and it goes back to the movie fights in me. I have this thing where I think that if somebody pushes back against something, I think if I can just explain it reasonably enough, or, if I could just make them understand where I'm coming from, then we could at least get to this point of agreement. And that is a road to madness. And I've found that now. This inflation thing and some other stuff has kind of pushed me to it. But I do hear that a lot. It's like, so-and-so thinks inflation adjusts. Okay, if you think adjusting for inflation is stupid, that's fine. I get it. I don't care. I'm going to keep doing it. And you can think what you want, but I feel like there's people out there that think that they can seem like the same way that I think if I'm reasonable enough that I can convince people to at least see where I'm coming from, they think that they can push me hard enough that I'm not going to do it anymore. No, I'm going to keep doing it. Black Bag says, do you think Jared Leto's controversy will affect Tron Ares? They haven't pulled back from featuring him in trailers, promos, and so on. Shameful. No. I mean, will it affect it at all? There will be some people like yourself who have read stuff about Jared Leto that they're not happy with that won't go see the movie. So I think it could affect it in that way. But here's the thing with online, with stuff that is generally mostly an online thing because the Jared Leto stuff is not necessarily something I've seen a whole lot in, this like the quote unquote news, meaning the stuff that kind of goes beyond the internet. I think that there's an overestimation of how much the average person knows about that sort of thing. And I don't think that the average moviegoer is really that well versed in what's been said about Jared Leto and everything else as the person online. It's just that when you're online and you engage in discussion online, I think there's often an overestimation about just how prevalent these things are and how well known they are. And this is not, by the way, to say, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I think there's an overestimation in online discussions about how well known online narratives are to the average person buying a ticket. So it could affect the business to some degree. But I think that Disney is casting a wider net there. And I think there are going to be a lot of people that are more excited about Tron and are more excited about how the movie looks, or that maybe know Jared Leto but aren't really up on what's been said about him. I'm not going to say nothing, but I don't think it's going to be as big of an effect as many other people think. Christopher Brickner, thank you, Chris, says, how do you think Star Wars Starfighter will do financially? With Star Wars being worse off than Marvel, I think it will make less than Thunderbolts. Again, Chris, it's way too early. We don't know anything about the movie. We don't know what the story is. We don't know what the marketplace is going to look like. It's just way too early to make any kind of a financial forecast or prognostication about it, because even as I said before, even how one movie did in a franchise like Pixar or the MCU, where they're all not directly connected to each other, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have the same effect the next time. So I just think it's way too early to start making any kind of thought about that. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, favorite Muppet? Ooh, I mean, that's like asking who my favorite child is. On any given day, I could tell you Swedish Chef. On any given day, I could tell you Beaker. I mean, obviously Kermit, if you're going to be basic, and I am often basic. Kermit, Fozzie Bear is right up there. I have a soft spot for Rolf. I got to say, I like Rolf. I think Rolf is just like a super cute, super positive, cheerful Muppet. But I mean, if you're going to force me into like choosing the one that makes me laugh the most, and I think that that's kind of how you can deal with Muppets. The one that makes me laugh the most is the Swedish Chef, even though he has human hands. So he's not all Muppet. He's like part Muppet, but I think he's enough of a Muppet. So yeah, I'm going to go Swedish Chef. Sakaki HDN JJBA Chrono says, hi Dan, do you think you'll ever make another video like the one going over the studio logos? I don't know if I will or not. Honestly, because that I put more time into that video, that studio logo video, than any other video that I've ever done on this channel. And the return on that was not amazing. Not that I only do videos based off of how much they're going to make here on the channel. There's a lot of reasons I do videos, but for a video that involved and that time consuming, I'm pretty sure it cost me money at the end of the day, because if you think about the other videos I could have been doing in the time it took me to do that one. So I don't know if I'm going to do one that's quite as deep, just because I do have to take into account when I'm doing things, and it's part of the calculus that I don't love about having my own channel. I do have to take into account what is the return I'm going to get on the time that I'm putting into this, and am I okay with sacrificing maybe some of that because I like the project this much. That one, that it was so out of whack, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to do another one. So I like it though. I love that video. CKB says, thanks for your review of Naked Gun. Saw it a few days afterward. Great fun. Also the mention of Never Stop, Never Stopping, which I think is, I said in that video, the closest we've had to, I think, a modern Naked Gun type movie from Akiva Schaffer and The Lonely Island. And then Akiva Schaffer also behind the Naked Gun movie. I enjoyed that movie. Peter Parkers says, if movie fights were to come back to Screen Junkies and you were asked to submit a debate question, what would you ask? Great job with your channel, by the way. I don't know. I never really liked writing questions as much as I liked answering questions. So I would probably write something like, and kind of going back to, because we all pitched movie fights questions back in the day. And I'm trying to think of the ones that always did the best on the show. I think it's always, my favorite is always like, the ones that we all, if you watched movie fights, the ones that we always tried to avoid were questions that was like, and we did these fights, but like, what's the best Martin Scorsese movie? Because then you get a round of three people arguing why three good movies are good. And then the fight just becomes about, well, which good movie is the best? And that's not as much fun. So I always liked the who would you cast questions, or if you have to pick a bad movie, it's kind of trying to take a bad movie and spin it off into why it's worthwhile. Anything that just kind of puts it on its head. I think the least interesting fight would be, we're always, why are three good things good and which one's the best? So I think that it would probably be a question like that would kind of try to turn things on their head a little bit. Sakaki also says, what are your thoughts on Spider-Man Brave New Day starting filming despite releasing in a year from now versus the newest Jurassic World production timeline? Well, I think it's great for a movie to be filming a year before release, because that means they have plenty of time to shoot. They have plenty of time to edit. They have plenty of time for the visual effects. They have plenty of time to look at what they've got and do additional photography, which is not in and of itself a bad thing if you know what you're doing and you're not hurriedly trying to fix problems that you either knew were there or were in such a hurry that you didn't know were there. So I love that a movie has a big production timeline and plenty of time to finish. Jurassic World Rebirth was a rush job, and they said it was a rush job. They said they wanted to get it into theaters by this summer, and I think that you can probably tell. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, favorite Spielberg film post-2000? Well, I was not targeting you because I didn't know this question. I was talking about those movie fights questions that I'd submit. Favorite Spielberg film post-2000? These are always tough because I always forget about one. And then later on, I'm like, oh, yeah, obviously that one. I mean, Munich comes to mind. But no, I think it's got to be Catch Me If You Can. Unless I'm forgetting one. Yeah, I think it's probably Catch Me If You Can. But that's with the caveat that I might be forgetting one that's just extremely obvious. Kaz says, thoughts on the show Bob's Burgers and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. If you haven't seen them, would you be interested in watching them? I have seen some of Bob's Burgers. I think it's a funny show. I've never actually watched It's Always Sunny because there's so much of it that there's like a barrier to getting in. But I would be very interested in watching both because I've seen some episodes of Bob's Burgers and I've seen some clips of It's Always Sunny, and they're both really funny. Gil1 says, you mentioned premium collector's editions for movies before. Have you ever seen/owned these? Brands like Manta Lab or Blue Fans look amazing, but pricey. I own a couple, not from those particular brands. I own a couple from, I think it's Arrow Video, ARROW. I think they put out the RoboCop one that I have. There's another one called Umbrella that's kind of a specialty title. A company that I have some movies from, and then Criterion, obviously. But those two I haven't seen. I might have to look those up. Potter Party 01, hi Alan, says, hey Dan, I'm doing a Summer of Seymour special list exploring the filmography of Philip Seymour Hoffman. What is your favorite Hoffman performance? Also, remember to hydrate. Thank you. I don't have anything around me to drink right now, but that's okay. Ooh, what is my favorite Philip Seymour Hoffman performance? Honestly, I think they're all good, but I've always loved him in Charlie Wilson's War. It's not necessarily the most dramatic, and maybe it doesn't show as much of his range as some of his other movies, but that movie channeled his energy in such a great and specific way that I always go back to that. Like if I want to watch him in a movie where I'm like, I just want to really sit and enjoy him acting, it would be Charlie Wilson's War, because I think he's so great in that movie. Cowgen says, you are the best. What are your thoughts on Foundation? Well, thank you for saying I'm the best. I appreciate that. I try, but I think there's a lot of other great people out there too. Foundation I haven't seen. I hear it's great. I like sci-fi. Haven't seen the show, but it goes on the list. Tyler Anderson says, hi, Dan. I remember once you said that Shaun of the Dead was your favorite Edgar Wright film, but The World's End was his best. Is this still your opinion? And could you explain or expand on the distinction more? Yeah, sure. Shaun of the Dead is my favorite Edgar Wright movie. I think I actually promised a Why the World's End is Edgar Wright's best movie when I launched this channel 5 years ago. One of the reasons I haven't done it is that, quite frankly, Universal, who is the studio behind World's End here, at least, is a nightmare when it comes to copyright on YouTube. I get copyright claims based off of trailer clips from press kits that I have the permission to use from Universal, and the Why I Love Jaws video that I did when I launched the video. That's a Universal movie. It was such a headache to get a video essay that's all clips of the movie approved and through the filters, and I've still gotten claims on it that I've had to fight that I didn't do World's End because I knew it'd be the same fight. But I think that The World's End is maybe his best movie, and I still think, I kind of owe them all another watch, but I just love what they did with the characters in that movie. And that's not to say that the characters in Shaun of the Dead are bad, they're great characters. But I think that there is another level to The World's End that is present, especially in Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, but that is done so well there. And a lot of it is in kind of switching and having Simon Pegg play the more serious part. Not more serious. I mean, it's almost like Simon Pegg and Nick Frost could have switched roles. He's kind of the screw up, and Nick Frost is the straight laced guy. But that what the movie's saying about the difficulty of that character and why he's doing this, and like the alien invasion by the end is almost kind of secondary to the advancement of Simon Pegg's character and what he's going through, and the performance is so good, and there are just little moments like when they're in the bar, and I think it's Eddie Marsan's character sees the guy who bullied him in high school, and he's bothered by it, and he said, it's like, well, what's upsetting you? Is it because you saw him? And it's like, no, it's because he saw me. He made my life a living hell every day, and he saw me, and he didn't know who I was. So it was that insignificant to him, but it changed my life in a negative way, in ways that he's still dealing with it. I just think and that's one of several different moments. I just think that there is a level there that works for me in a way that it doesn't. It's also a little messier, I think, in some ways than the other movies that Edgar Wright has made. But that's why I would make that argument, and I owe that movie another watch. Brent Dreer says, "Hey Dan, did you see the trailer for Brendan Fraser's new one, Rental Family? Looks like a great acting Oscar contender for him to me." I have not seen that. Generally, if I don't feel like I should watch a trailer, I don't, because I like to be surprised when I see a trailer, but maybe I'll check that one out. Zach Martin says, "Hey Dan, do you know if Disney gets any profits from the Spider-Man movies they make for Sony? Do you think Sony ends the deal soon with the MCU struggling?" Okay, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, and it could also be out of date, I believe that Disney has the rights to use Spider-Man in their movies, in the MCU, so they get creative control and the right to use Spider-Man in the MCU. The movies that are made for Sony, Sony gets the money for that, but I believe Disney has a chunk of the merchandising. Again, it could be the other way around. But basically, the advantage for Disney is that they get Spider-Man to use in their movies in the MCU, which then helps to sell a movie like Civil War or a movie like Infinity War. They can use Spider-Man, but they also can help Sony build out a universe there. Disney has a stake, but I believe it's involved with merchandising. Again, I could be wrong. It's been a while since I looked at that deal. Gil One says, "Longtime fan, thanks for all your charts and reviews." Thank you for the comment. I really appreciate it. Julius Wyatt says, "Your Mount Rushmore of movie directors." I mean, that is almost an impossible task because there's so many. I mean, I could sit here for 30 minutes and try to figure it out. Personally, it would probably be Spielberg, Hitchcock, and then there's like 50 other people that I could put on there. Spielberg, Hitchcock, Billy Wilder maybe, and maybe Scorsese. But honestly, I'd have to sit and look at the entirety of film, because that's just personal, and I could still be leaving people out. That's so hard to do. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, "Favorite Tom Cruise movie / performance?" Favorite Tom Cruise movie? I mean, Top Gun is a great movie. It's not his best movie, but it might be my favorite one. Not Maverick, the first Top Gun, but that's also because I'm a child of the '80s and '90s, and it holds a certain appeal to me. Performance, I mean, I think he's great in Jerry Maguire. Magnolia, obviously, totally different gear for Tom Cruise, and I mean, Tropic Thunder. That is one of his all-time great roles, and that's not me joking. That is Tom Cruise giving 100% commitment to a completely unvanity, completely no vanity involved comedic part, and he was great in it. So. Gil One says, "Will you do a spoiler video for Fantastic Four? Take care, Dan." At this point, I don't think so. I thought about doing it, but I didn't feel like I had a substantial amount more to add to what I thought than what I'd already said. So, yeah, I don't know if we'll do one at this point. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, "Thoughts on Speed Racer 2008? It's been a minute since I saw it. I think that I get where people are coming from with the underrated thing. I think it's been a little bit overblown." Compared to it's that course adjustment where a movie comes out and everyone says it's bad, and then it's actually really not that bad. It's actually got a lot of really good qualities, but then because of that, it sort of course corrects to, oh my God, this movie's a masterpiece and it's one of the best movies ever made. Again, from my memory, I don't know if I'd go that far with Speed Racer, but I think it has certainly got an unfair shake when it came out because people weren't really quite sure what to make of it. Hello, Joseph says, any thoughts on John Campia's take on inflation? Well, I addressed that earlier. Like I said, I use it as a bit of an historical reference point. Other people can certainly use that information differently, but I'm going to continue to use it. Christian Unpronounceable. All right. I keep asking this of fellow movie lovers, but have you seen The Man from Earth? It's my favorite movie ever. You know, I have not seen The Man from Earth, but what I love about movies is there can be a movie that you've never heard of, and somebody can say, that's my favorite movie in the world. And that's really, I think, at the end of the day, when it comes to box office or reviews or anything, that's the real value of movies, is somebody can make something that, even if it's not something that everybody's heard of, to somebody out there, that movie is their favorite movie. And I think that's probably why most artists do it too, because they want to make something that connects to people in that way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to everybody. Certainly not why David Lynch did it. He did it because he just liked to make weird things that were in his head, and he thought it was, and it is just a miracle to get to do that for a living and to bring that to life and to find people that connect with that too. So I'll put that on my list. Yoshimitsu says, "Hi Dan, there's an addiction share and occasional market share chart that I would be curious to see. Which studios made the most money / which studios spent the most money? Love your work, thanks." That's something that would be interesting because, for example, Sony and Paramount this year. Not great, or sorry, yes, right? Sony, Paramount, and God, I can't even. Sorry, I've been talking for almost an hour, and my brain has just decided to short circuit. Paramount and Sony, though, particularly this year, have not made a lot of money at the box office, but they also haven't spent a whole lot of money. So that's something they can look into. Austin Bundy says, "Hi, Dan, long-time watcher, first-time chatter. Thank you and welcome. Flashing back to the discussion on plagiarism last week, has a studio / screenwriter ever gone all the way to trial for this, and what was the outcome?" That is a great question. I do not have that sort of information on hand. I'm sure I could probably do some research. I imagine that somebody has definitely gone to trial for plagiarism, and I'm sure that it's probably been proven every once in a while. But I think that the problem is it is so often alleged with no proof and no way to prove it. But I am sure that there has been a case where, I know that there have been cases in the music industry where it's gone to trial and it has been found that, yes, we have probable cause reason to believe that you did use this piece of music and plagiarized it. I'm not sure if it's ever happened with the screenplay. I'm sure somebody else out there might know. But I have no doubt that it has probably happened at least once. Christopher Brickner says, "What do you think Chapek's biggest mistake at Disney was?" I think it was overhauling their studio structure to take a lot of power from creators like Feige and give it to bankers and financial people. Well, that was certainly part of it. I mean, the big thing with Bob Chapek, and he made a lot of mistakes. He wasn't there for a while, and there's a reason why he wasn't there for a while. But I think the thing that a lot of people forget about Bob Chapek and his time as the head of Disney is that a lot of his strategy was also Bob Iger's strategy. I mean, Bob Iger was there and kind of helped lay the groundwork for what the future of the company was going to be. Bob Chapek certainly did not help things with how he decided to do business. But Bob Iger was not blameless in what happened at Disney. I think that the biggest mistake that happened in his tenure, and it was the same mistake that everybody did. I get it that it was COVID and things were falling apart, but it was that idea of prioritizing streaming over everything and dumping everything into streaming and going to your creatives, going to Kevin Feige, going to Kathleen Kennedy and the Star Wars team and saying, we need you to triple your output and we need you to make a streaming series and 5 streaming series and also keep up with what you're doing theatrically. But the future is in streaming, and that's where we're putting our time and energy. That was a mistake. And we're still seeing what's happened here, which is that they overexposed their franchises. The quality of what they had already dropped substantially. And we are seeing that bear out at the box office now. And they're realizing that streaming was not the pie in the sky, absolute profit buster that everybody thought it was going to be. Some of that strategy was Bob Chapek's, and some of it was Bob Iger's. But I think that was the biggest mistake of the Chapek era, was this idea of going so wildly into the streaming services that it devalued so much of what you had at your company otherwise. We are going to talk about Paramount, but you guys have sent in so many great questions, and I just want to, I want to make sure I get to all of them and make sure that, that I'm here for you and that I want to answer your questions. Let's see. Drew Skizzy says, I know it was brought up on charts, but would you consider a standalone video about the validity of Naja 2's worldwide gross as it opens dubbed domestic soon? Would I do a video about it? No. Because I have looked into it, and I think, really the question behind it is people that say that it's not legitimate and that Chinese grosses are not legitimate. And I've shared my thoughts on that before. I don't think that it would change anyone's mind who has already decided that they're not legitimate. I think it would just cause people to continue to argue about it. It's sort of like the inflation thing. I've looked into it and I've done my research, and there have been some instances in the past where there were some grosses from China that were called into question, and that was dealt with. And I have no reason to believe, because of how Chinese box office tracking works and because you can look and see which tickets have been bought where in real time. Box office tracking in China is actually more accessible in real time than box office tracking here in the United States. And, people say like, well, it's not valid because, people are made to go or whatever. It's like, okay, but that's still money that's coming in. You can argue about why those people went to the theater but if it's actual money, I think the only problem is if you're fabricating a gross entirely. But would I do a whole video about it? I don't think so, because I think it would just be frustrating for me, because I would say what I thought and it would just be 1,000 people screaming at me why I'm wrong. So no, I don't have any reason to believe right now that the gross is illegitimate, and I will continue covering it on charts as such. And I think that's pretty much the closest you'll see on the channel to that. Marcus Dudley says, love the show, Dan. Thank you. Go Knowles. Thank you so much, Marcus. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, favorite Sorkin written film? Probably A Few Good Men. That's the one I've also seen the most recently. I really love it. I love a good courtroom drama, and it fits his dramatic style a little bit more than some of his other movies, where I think it stands out a little bit. Social Network. It just popped in my head. No, it's got to be Social Network, but A Few Good Men's right behind it. Christopher Brickner says, as a Star Wars prequel fan, I'll say there were people who said prequel fans were wrong to like them. Also, hearing much negativity about a film makes you feel there's something wrong with you for liking a film. Well, there's never anything wrong with anybody for liking a film. I only think of a couple of instances where that would be the case. No one should ever tell you you're wrong to like a movie that you like. That is completely a matter of personal opinion. And honestly, things have shifted nowadays where the less popular sentiment was that the prequels were good movies. But I would almost argue now you get more criticized for saying that the prequels are not good movies than saying that they are bad movies or good movies because the generational shift, the generational divide there are generations that grew up on on those movies now that are it's a childhood thing to them. They have a sentimental attachment to them. It didn't come with the baggage that the prequels had for people that were in high school like me or older, like Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright and their thoughts on the prequels, and the people that were in charge of writing movies and TV shows and doing the news for so long. So, I mean, yeah, the sentiment around a movie changes all the time. There's movies that have been completely undervalued and underappreciated at one point in my life that are now considered classics. Austin Powers was not a popular movie when it came out. It only got popular when it hit home video. It only took a couple years, but it's not always about the first impression. So, but yeah, no one should ever tell anybody, "Oh, you're wrong for liking that," because I think that's a little bit. It's the arrogance of thinking that your opinion is the right one, and I don't think that that is always true. I think that opinions are not right or wrong. They're opinions. So if you're going to send in a question for this week's show, go ahead and send it in here in the next couple minutes because I'm going to cover this Paramount story, and then we're going to answer whatever questions we have left, and then we're going to wrap it up. It's been a pretty good live stream this week, and thank you to everybody that sent in your questions. But before we go, I wanted to quickly talk about Paramount, new Paramount, which that deal will be closing soon. Skydance will assume control over Paramount, take over their assets. We've talked about it a lot here on the channel. But this past week, we have finally figured out, or at least it's been announced, who the leadership of Paramount will be, what the structure is going to look like. And I wanted to share that with you because these are the people that are going to be controlling what you see on Paramount Plus, what you see in theaters from Paramount for the next handful of years. So this is the new leadership team for what will be the combined company of Paramount and Skydance. The CEO, of course, we know is going to be David Ellison, who's the current head of Skydance. Jeff Shell will be president of the company. He is the former head of NBC Universal. But we now also know who the chair of TV media is. It's a man named George Cheeks. He's currently one of the co-CEOs at Paramount. He is the CEO of CBS, and he is reportedly the person that made the decision to cancel Stephen Colbert's Late Show. Part of his portfolio will be to oversee South Park. So that could be a very interesting relationship between George Cheeks and the people at South Park. But he's going to handle television, not necessarily streaming, but the stuff that is on broadcast. Then we have two chairs of Paramount Pictures. One of them is Dana Goldberg. She's currently the chief creative officer at Skydance. So any of their films, including the Mission Impossible movies, she's been involved with, a lot of other streaming films. And then Josh Greenstein is the other co-chair of Paramount Pictures. He was the co-head of Sony's movie division. He actually left that job to join Paramount. He was there over the relaunch of Spider-Man and the Venom movies and the Tom Holland era, the Spider-Verse movies and what we've seen at Sony over the last few years. So a veteran and somebody who has been able to relaunch franchises and oversee some hit films. And then the chair of the direct-to-consumer department, which would be streaming, is Jennifer Holland. Now, Jennifer Holland is somebody we used to talk about all the time, especially over on Screen Junkies News. She worked at Netflix for 18 years. She was the head of original programming at Netflix at the time when they launched with Stranger Things and House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. She basically oversaw Netflix original programming when it became a force to be reckoned with. They did some corporate reshuffling in 2020 and she left the company. But she is going to be the head of the direct-to-consumer division at the new Paramount Global, or the Paramount, whatever they're going to call it. So you've got some veterans. I mean, you've got some people that would be considered heavy hitters there. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this team works together because they have a lot to do. They have a big job to do over there. Not only are they trying to turn Paramount around and make that company successful and help to make CBS successful, but they're also fighting the public perception now of everything that's going on with the merger and what happened with the Trump administration and the allegations of CBS News now being less trustworthy because worried about whether or not they're going to tailor their news coverage to what the administration wants. I mean, they have a lot of different things to do, and they're bringing in some pretty high profile people to do it. But Paramount is a company that has just been, I mean, it's been in a bit of a tailspin for a while now, and they have a lot to do. They have a lot of ground to make up, and of course, David Ellison also trying to reshape the whole company as a hybrid entertainment and tech company. It's going to be an interesting few years at Paramount because they have a lot of fires to put out and not a whole lot of time to do it. So let's see if we've got any more questions before we wrap up. Another one, from Christopher Brickner. Thank you. Has there been a celebrity you like but said/did something that left lingering bad feelings for them? For me, it was Simon Pegg, when in 2015 he said he doesn't respect people who like the prequels. Again, Simon Pegg is, first of all, he's a comedian. He is from a generation where I wouldn't take that too seriously, honestly. And I mean, again, that was 10 plus years ago. The difference has the idea of what the prequels are has changed. He's a different person than he was 10 years ago. But sure, there have definitely been celebrities that have said things that make me go, oh yeah, well, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. You just have to decide whether that's going to affect if you enjoy their movies or don't. There's some people that I'm like, okay, I don't think I'll watch their movies or their shows anymore because of this reason or that reason. And some people I'm like, well, I wish they hadn't said that, but also they're a person, it's, et cetera. But Simon Pegg also, he is a comedian, and also like he was at the leading edge of the anti-prequel movement because he was older. He was an adult when the prequels came out, and they had a whole episode of Spaced about the prequels, et cetera. I mean, it's a different experience. I would say, cut us some slack. It's a while ago. Drew Skizzy says post 2020 box office success: 2021 Sony Spider-Man, 2022 Paramount Top Gun, 2023 Universal Mario Oppenheimer, 2024 Disney Deadpool and Wolverine Inside Out, 2025 Warner Brothers. I mean, yeah, I mean, although Warner Brothers, you got to throw Warner Brothers into 2023 because they also had Barbie that year. But you often see that where you'll have a studio that has a good year, and that's not unusual. I mean, it does kind of rotate between studios. This long era of dominance between Disney and Universal has had not been the norm before. It was more cyclical, but that's the great thing about studios is one year you're on top, and the next year you're not so great, but you're just one movie away from turning it around. I mean, that's just the way that studios go. I think we got one here at the very end. I was just about to wrap it up, but let's see. Ama C says, "Hi Dan, speaking of Simon Pegg, will you ever release any videos on Edgar Wright World's End? Recall you may have mentioned way back when." Yeah, if you missed it, I addressed that earlier in the show, but it's still on the list. It's just that it may be difficult with considering how weird Universal can be with copyright, especially when it comes to video essays. One last one for Christopher Brickner. Thank you, Chris. You got a lot of questions today. With Spider-Man and Avengers 5 in 2026, I think the MCU will recover as long as they maintain quality. I'm glad they moved Avengers 5 back 7 months to December. I mean, that's the thing. When people talk about the MCU, Spider-Man in particular, and maybe the Avengers movies, we'll see, kind of transcend the MCU. It's kind of like the Deadpool Wolverine type thing. Yes, people are going to think about maybe the last MCU film they saw, but there are certain heroes that sort of are more than the MCU brand name, and Spider-Man is absolutely one of them, and that could help to boost Avengers, the next Avengers films, and we got 2 more of those coming up. I'm not a doomer necessarily about the next movie, the next Avengers movie. I think that the MCU has a consistency problem, and they need to figure out how to get people to show up to more of their movies like they did in the past. But I don't subscribe to the idea that the Avengers necessarily is in trouble or that Spider-Man necessarily is in trouble, because I also think that there are things that are bigger than the MCU. And then finally, we have Metal Hendrix, who sent a sticker in for $4.99. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that yeah, I saw this come up a couple times. So let's just see what Tyler. Hey Dan, there's a communication theory of resonance. So people have shark phobia viewing Jaws too young. Different generations have their own. Clowns for it in the '90s. Potter for spiders. What's yours? Well, mine doesn't come from. I mean, I definitely was scared of the shark when I saw Jaws and clowns. I remember seeing Pee Wee's Big Adventure and clowns, not being too high on clowns. Mine's frogs, but I don't think it's anything to do with what I watched when I was a kid. I think I just something, I don't know, maybe I saw one in real life and it scared. I don't know, but I have a huge phobia of frogs. Can't stand them. Can't look, not in real life, not on television, not on a screen, not a picture, not a video, TikTok or nothing. Can't do it. I am yeah, no. No, thank you. Anyway, so you learned something about me today, and let's wrap up the show with that. So you've now learned what my biggest fear in the world is. I'm sure that that information will not be used for evil against me at some point during the line. Thank you so much for watching this show. I'm still getting my feet underneath me with the whole live show thing and figuring out. I'm not sure if this whole second monitor thing is going to work out the way I wanted it to between this week and last week, and the fact that it kind of distorts the picture the way that I have it when I have the video, so I don't have to keep looking back and forth. But I'm going to keep looking at ways to improve my setup here and make the show better. Hopefully it looked a little better and sounded a little better this week, and maybe it'll look and sound a little bit better next week. But most of all, thank you for watching. Thank you to everybody that sent in your questions. Thank you for taking that big heaping plate of broccoli that I offered up with all the Disney stuff. And be sure to stay tuned right here. Tomorrow, I am going to go see Weapons in the afternoon. They're doing it a little bit earlier than they do a lot of advanced screenings. I'm seeing it 2:17 p.m. So I'm hoping to maybe get my review of Weapons out tomorrow night. I am desperate to see that movie. They had literally no advanced screenings anywhere near me. I'm not talking about in my town. I'm talking about in my region. In a 3 to 5 hour radius, they did not do advanced screenings of Weapons, and I'm so disappointed because that is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I'm going to go see it at the first opportunity tomorrow, and I will get you that review here on the channel, and then probably also check out Freakier Friday. And if I've got stuff to say about that, then I'll say it then too. But thank you to everyone who's watching. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions. And thank you to everybody who is a subscriber here on the channel. If you're not, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified. And I will be back next week with another live show. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.